Guys, welcome back to DeFi, degens, drip, and farm for poverty. Where on this channel, our vision is to empower the impoverished by helping you find financial freedom through crypto assets. Please subscribe and leave a comment and a thumbs up. Hey guys, welcome back. DeFi, degens, drip, and farm for poverty. So in today's video, we're going to talk about Raoul Pal again. So you guys have seen him on my channel multiple times, talking about him because he is one of the most renowned in the space for macro thesis and macroeconomics and stuff, and understanding how the space is changing. And in this video, he talks basically about his investment thesis and how, if he had stuck to it, how much money it would have made him in the long run. But he forgot about it and ended up kind of making less, even though he made a very smart decision. So we're going to tie that into drip and how that's going to pan out for you guys that are looking at getting into it, and why having an investment thesis, or what I call a strategy. I just learned about this investment thesis terminology. If you're familiar with science, you know that a thesis is something that you create to determine if something is true or not, and then you evaluate it and then make your decisions based off of that. But first, let's take a look at the definition of an investment thesis from Investopedia. An investment thesis is a reasoned argument for a particular investment strategy, backed up by research and analysis. Financial world, an analysis may prepare a formal document outlining an investment thesis for presentation to potential investors or investment committee. So for yourself, this is something you should do before getting into a crypto project. Do your own research, the DYDD, do your own due diligence, or whatever that one is. So basically it's saying not only should you do it, but you should also write it down. That's one thing he mentions in here. Most investment theses are in written form, so you can go back and look at why you made the decision in the first place. Because what will happen, undeniably, is that you will make it with a lot of data analysis and information at that time. And if it's a long-term play, 6, 9, 12 months from now, you forget the information that you gathered to make that informed decision, and then something else happens, be it a macro play with a war or a recession or COVID lockdowns, and you go, crap, I have this money, I'm gonna pull it out, or something changes with the fundamental tokenomics or whatever in the contract, and then you go back and look at it again as well, and then now you're doing it with emotion versus the thesis that you had in the beginning. So let's listen to Raoul Pal tell about what happened with his Bitcoin investment thesis and how that played out, and then I'm gonna tell you how that works for drip. Just a quick message, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. That does help the channel, as well as help bring brand awareness to all Forex Shark related projects. Thanks.
So I first heard about Bitcoin during the European crisis in 2012. I realized that this was a solution to a lot of the global financial system, and I wrote the first macro strategy piece on Bitcoin probably ever published in Global Macro Investor in 2013. And it was driven by a friend of mine, Emil Woods, who's is very well known in the space, and Chad Cascarello, who are Global Macro Investor subscribers, saying, listen, you need to look at Bitcoin. So I looked at it. They happened to have started an exchange called ItBit, which is now Paxos, and I ended up buying Bitcoin. And I stuck a decent size in because my analysis was, it's at $200 now. If I back out the analysis versus the stock to flow of gold, this is worth $1 million with the gold at these current prices. Therefore, it's underpriced. I hadn't figured out anything else about network effects, but I kind of understood that this was potentially important, and I assumed that it would go to zero. So my downside was 200, my upside was 999,000, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, I assumed that I am a total idiot, which I try and assume most of the time, and therefore I'm 90% wrong. So if the upside is 100,000, and it's at $200, it's the best risk reward any of us will ever come across in our entire lives, and maybe one of the best risk rewards of all time. So I took that bet, right? Macro thesis, did the work, said this is probably a 10-year play, and I'm going to hold it. So first thing that happens, I put the position on, it goes up 100%. It goes up 100% a month and 500% in the next 4 months. I'm like, holy shit. I don't sell any because I've got a long-term thesis and it's fresh in my mind. It then falls 85%, but luckily back to my entry level. So it gets back to 200. I don't do anything because I had a long-term thesis. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then 2017, it starts coming to life again and it's starting to scream higher. And now it's at 2000 or 2200. And I'm like, okay, I'm up 10x, which is good. My thesis obviously was a lot more, but I'd forgotten that because now the forking wars had started. And I suddenly thought, is this existential? Is this the S-curve moment where it fails? So I sold it. It went up another 10x to 20,000. I didn't worry about that because I'd made 10x and it was okay. It was a good trade. And I was worried that it wasn't going to be able to play out my thesis because of these forking wars. And then it fell 85%. I wasn't in it. And eventually I got in April 2020. And I can't remember what my average was. Call it 6,800 or something. And then I'm still long, and then rotated into ETH and did other stuff. But anyway, so great trade, one of the best trade of my life. I went back and looked at if I just kept my initial investment at $200, I would have done, I can't remember that I'm 5 times better, even though the size that I added in March 2020 was massively larger than the first size.
Interesting.
It still didn't work. I'm like, huh. And then I thought, okay, if I'd actually followed my thesis, which is when it gets very oversold and it gets to that kind of logarithmic, the bottom, the 2 standard deviations oversold of a logarithmic channel or whatever, if I'd actually just doubled my position every time, but not doubled it, sorry, just added the same amount as my initial seed investment, I'd have done like 25x. I'm like, okay. So what I thought was a great trade was actually a terrible trade because I didn't trade my plan and I didn't think about what I was trying to achieve. So that's leads into the question about, okay, the market sell off now. I'm immensely comfortable because I see the network adoption. I've got even more models to understand how this space works. I see how broad and deep the talent, the adoption, the kind of conversations that Greg and I have with people all the time, it's like seeing the future. So therefore, the volatility now, I've been adding as fast as I can, scraping the sofa for coins, anything to put more money in.
Raoul. All right, so let that sink in for a bit. He said he first heard about Bitcoin in 2012, and then he decided to go in with at the entry cost around $200 because he did the evaluation and said that it was undervalued and its potential upside was a $1 million Bitcoin. But he said he also knows that it could go to zero and that he could be 90% wrong. So if he's 90% wrong, he said that, okay, it's going to go to 100,000. So that's where he got his thesis from on the evaluation of Bitcoin. And he said that the downside was $200 or whatever he entered in with, and the upside was 100,000. So whatever X that would actually be. So that's what made him decide to take this risk. And he then forgot about it and let it sit out and basically decided to get out when it went into the forking wars in 2017, and he got out with a 10x trade. And at that time, though, he had forgotten about his thesis and didn't go back and evaluate that it was for a 10-year plan. And this had only been 5 years. And so he went ahead and made a decision. He thought it was the best decision of his life. And then he comes back and evaluates that if he would have stayed in, he would have made 5x on top of the 10x that he had if he had just kept the original. And if he had actually added back to his position whenever it got oversold. So in results to the Bitcoin, looking at the drip price, if he had bought in here and then bought in again when it got oversold, held it, bought in again when it got oversold, and then again down here, and then again here, and down here where we're at, he would be up 25x. So in layman's terms, his $200 investment would be like $50,000 with the dollar cost averaging, or it would have been 10,000 as opposed to the 2,000 that he made. He put in a lot more. I'm just using round numbers. So what does that have to do with drip? Well, the whole thing I showed you on one of my other videos. Let me see if I can pull that up. In this video here, it turned 1K into 30K per month in only 6 months. That video, I talk about that. And in this video here, why you must buy drip before July 29th. And it's because of that risk reward. And I mentioned that also in the cost of inaction in the COI video that came out. Well, this one's about trading time for money. This one here, right? So you have to evaluate, looking at the fundamentals, the tokenomics, the community, all this stuff. When you do your own research, you have to come to this decision. But you have to look at what is it going to cost you to get in, and what happens if your thesis is wrong and it goes to zero. Well, you lose whatever you got in with, right? So don't mortgage your house. But what happens if it plays out to what other people in the space are speculating, or whatever your research says it can speculate to? Like, for example, we've heard from Forex himself that this can be a 4-figure coin. So as of right now, you're sitting at a $8. Why is this sitting at percentages? 1 second. I see my toggle changes it back. So right now you're sitting at an $8 price. And if what other people are saying, what the developer is saying, and what you can hear some other YouTubers saying, you got to do your own research, but let's just say they're right. This is a 4-figure coin. That means at a minimum, it's $1,000, right? That's 4 figures. So that means you have a 120x from here with a, I don't know what the downside would be, but depending on how much you put in, you know, if you put in $100 right now to get 10 drip, you have a $100 loss if it goes to zero. But what does your thesis say, and how long are you willing to wait? Raoul Pal said a 10-year thesis for Bitcoin. I've said on my channel a minimum of 6 months. Right now, I just approached that 6-month mark for me, and I just broke even with my drip faucet like value in the faucet. So I haven't ROI'd at all, but I would push that out to at least a year. I think when I first got in, I said a year, and then I made some changes and wanted to get it more aggressively. So I would say at least a year. So if you can look at drip for a year, Bitcoin's 10 years, but you know, drip for a year, and then evaluate at the end of that year, and then you go back to your thesis and ask yourself, has anything changed in your thesis? Like, has BNB been sanctioned and put on the blacklist or something like that? Or has there been no more developments on the Forex ecosystem? Has all of the YouTubers closed down their channels and ran away? Like, that's what you would evaluate in your thesis. If nothing has changed in that regard, then you would just continue to play out your thesis, right? So the downside is minimal compared to the upside, and even as Raoul Pal said, even with a 90% you're wrong kind of cost basis. So even at 90%, you'd still would be sitting at a decent percentage increase from where we're at now, and 1 year of compound interest on that seems like that would be a great risk reward. Of course, not financial advice, you got to make that decision. But that's why I try to show you guys the people on the channel that are the best and brightest in their areas, and then we want to just extrapolate that out to how that works with drip. And again, the cool thing with drip is that this is a community driven project. This is DeFi. It's much tighter knit with less influence, so to speak, from the big boys like BlackRock and things of that nature. Granted, there are people in our ecosystem that have the money to be able to swing the price one way or another, but due to the community and what's being built and all the additional use cases, and not just use cases from Forex, but use cases from the community, then this has a lot of potential, and you got to factor that into your analysis as well. And you have to come up with your own thesis for this, but I'm just showing you guys what I've done and what I think, and I still believe that, yeah, 1 year is definitely a good time horizon. So I will be definitely taking this out. I'm actually in the ability to probably take profits at this stage. You guys already saw that my first profit taking was to sponsor a kid here in Cambodia, but I will be looking at taking profits in September for, actually this month, I guess, for this video, for a trip that I want to take to a Asia fitness conference for health and fitness, because you guys know I do training. So there's a huge conference that they do every year in Bangkok. So I want to pay for that to go there. So I can still take profits even though it hasn't been a year. And if you make a thesis and figure out what your dollar cost average price is, you can also determine what price levels you can take profits on. And there are multiple strategies. And remember, this is just drip. This is not the whole ecosystem. So there are other ways to ROI and utilize the ecosystem to kind of make this more sustainable and do things in a different way. So it's just crazy what's being built. Bitcoin basically is relying on market adoption and people and industries to get in and see the value of it and hold it, which has already gotten that following. So we know that it's continuing to get market adoption. But there's no utility being built on drip. Built on top of Bitcoin. The utility for Bitcoin is a store of value. And if you listen to Michael Saylor, then it's a way to transmit energy across a network. But in and of itself, it doesn't have anything else built on top of it. All the other stuff that's being built is like ETH and programmable contracts and stuff like that. With the Lightning Network, maybe there's utility in regards to being a payment platform. But anyway, I'm divulging onto another topic and stuff. So the point with drip is that there's massive things being built by the community and utility and other things that make this have much more long-term bullish tokenomics, even though there will be a lot of volatility, as Raoul Pal said about Bitcoin. So again, my whole point for this is that I want you guys to listen to these voices, get some informed decisions from external locations in the macro environment, and see how that plays out. I've showed you guys multiple different videos on my channel where we talk about, you know, what can come into drip and what the macro looks like. In the video that I did here about the payment network. I'm sorry, this is about the education network or platform where people are getting paid for. Then you have about utility for payment processing and stuff. So there's all sorts of stuff coming to crypto. Mass adoption isn't here yet. And all that's required for drip to pump with that mass adoption coming to crypto is that BNB stays alive. Because remember, the contracts are immutable. So all we need is BNB to be there. So again, factor that into your thesis. Is BNB going to be here? And I showed you them on the channel. They are the #1 exchange in the world and responsible for the most user adoption. So when you factor all that in, the downside for taking this risk compared to the upside, to me, is just, you know, a no-brainer. But again, you got to make your own decisions, because we can't give you financial or investment advice on this channel. But anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Continue to like, subscribe, push at 3,000, as you guys know. And of course, lift daily and achieve your impossible. See you guys.